The guardian's secret. The first time it happened, I was 10. Like most unexplainable things from childhood. It began on an ordinary night in my seemingly ordinary bedroom. I had drifted off to sleep as usual, but what followed was anything but normal. I found myself awake, or something close to it, floating near my bedroom ceiling. The perspective was jarring. I was looking down at my own body, peaceful and still beneath my blue comforter. It wasn't like watching a movie or seeing a photograph. I could feel the strange displacement, the vertigo of being in two places at once. The digital alarm clock on my nightstand caught my attention first. The red numbers were running backward, a detail that should have terrified me, but somehow didn't. It was as if my mind accepted this impossibility as perfectly natural, the way dreams often do. From my elevated vantage point, I noticed things about my room that seemed wrong. Crayon drawings decorated the walls, drawings I had no memory of creating. They were simple but consistent stick figures holding hands, always 5 of them, always standing before a house with a distinctive blue roof. I wasn't the artistic type. My parents still had trouble getting me to complete coloring books. These drawings felt foreign, yet somehow familiar. In the corner, partially hidden by shadows, sat my old wooden train. The sight of it made my stomach twist. That train had disappeared 2 years earlier, leading to weeks of tears and searching. Yet here it was, positioned differently each time this dream occurred, as if it had been playing musical chairs while I wasn't looking. I tried to move, to float toward these anomalies for a closer look, but I remained fixed near the ceiling. Only my head could turn, forcing me to observe like a security camera with limited range. The helplessness of this restriction filled me with a creeping dread. But the true horror always came from the window. As if following an unwritten script, my attention would inevitably be drawn to the glass panes facing the backyard. The curtains would be open, even though I distinctly remembered closing them before bed. And there, pressed against the outside of the window, would be a face. He was an older man with short gray hair, unremarkable except for one detail, a prominent scar on his left temple, raw and red as if recently acquired. His eyes would lock onto my floating form, not my sleeping body below, confirming he could see me in this impossible position. Then his hands would press against the glass, fingers splayed, and he would begin to scratch. The sound never reached me, but I could see his nails dragging across the surface, leaving no marks yet filling me with absolute certainty that he was trying to get in. This was always when I would wake up, heart pounding, sheets soaked with sweat. The dream came regularly, about once every 3 months, following the same pattern with perfect precision. After the 4th occurrence, I finally told my parents. Their reaction was typical, concerned but dismissive. Mom explained about recurring dreams being common at my age, while Dad did his best to reassure me with a thorough inspection of the house's exterior. But something in their exchange felt off. Quick glances between them, words left unsaid. I was young, but not too young to recognize when adults were hiding something. The dreams continued, becoming almost routine until that one night when everything changed. The familiar sequence played out: the clock, the drawings, the train, but this time, the window was already open. The mere sight of it shocked me awake, but consciousness brought no relief. Sleep paralysis gripped me like a vice. My mind screamed at my limbs to move, to run, to check the window, but my body remained frozen. Cold air kissed my skin, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of night air. The window was open, not in the dream, but in reality. Those 5 minutes of paralysis were an eternity. When movement finally returned, I launched myself at the window, finding it firmly locked. But the cold lingered, and so did the question, had it really been locked all along? After that night, something shifted. The dreams became less frequent, but they carried a new weight. I began preparing myself each night, rehearsing the dream in my mind before sleep, hoping to diminish its power. Surprisingly, this worked. The fear gradually faded to curiosity. That's when my parents finally shared the truth about Uncle Brian. He wasn't really my uncle, they explained, but a close friend who had been part of my early childhood. Something had happened, they wouldn't say, what that led to him being banned from our home, from my life. The detail that made my blood run cold. The scar on his temple, a souvenir from a car accident years before I was born. I had been too young to remember him, they said. Too young to have any memories of his face, his scar, his presence in our lives. Yet there he was, night after night, scratching at my window, his features perfectly matching a man I supposedly never knew. The dreams eventually stopped, but questions remained. How did I know his face? What had he done to be banished from our lives? And most troubling of all, on that night, when the window seemed open, had someone really been there? Some mysteries from childhood remain unsolved, buried beneath years of growing up and moving on. But sometimes, late at night, I still find myself looking up at my ceiling, wondering if part of me is still there, watching and waiting for answers that may never come. The warning Sarah hadn't wanted to join the sleepover at Emma's house, but her mother insisted it would be good for her. Social development. Now, squeezed between Emma and Lily on the living room floor, surrounded by sleeping bags and the remnants of microwave popcorn. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The house creaked unfamiliarly around them. Emma's parents were just upstairs, but the distance felt greater, more significant somehow. Outside, the October wind rattled bare branches against windows, creating shadows that danced across their makeshift bed space. "We should tell ghost stories," Lily suggested, her face illuminated by her phone's blue glow. Emma quickly agreed, but Sarah's stomach tightened. She'd always been sensitive to scary stories, experiencing them more vividly than others seemed to. As her friends traded increasingly elaborate tales of haunted houses and vengeful spirits, Sarah felt herself drifting. The sleeping bag's warmth became heavy, consuming. Soon, the girls' voices faded into a distant hum, and sleep claimed her. The dream began with water. She was standing in Emma's upstairs hallway, but it wasn't quite right. Everything seemed slightly off-center, as if the house had shifted a few degrees on its foundation. Water trickled down the walls, not in streams, but in perfect vertical lines, defying gravity. The carpet beneath her feet remained dry, despite the moisture surrounding her. A sound drew her attention, running water, coming from behind the bathroom door. Not the gentle flow of a tap, but the violent rush of a faucet turned full blast. Steam seeped through the gap beneath the door, carrying with it an acrid smell that burned her nostrils. Sarah knew she shouldn't open that door. Everything in her screamed to run, to wake up, to escape this wrong version of Emma's house. But dream logic prevailed, and her hand reached for the doorknob. The bathroom was filled with thick steam, the mirror completely fogged. The faucet ran full force, hot water thundering into the sink. But what made her blood freeze was the window, wide open. Curtains billowing inward despite the lack of wind outside. Then she saw the hand. Fingers gripped the windowsill from outside, pale and corpse, like against the white paint. As she watched, paralyzed, a second hand appeared, then the crown of a head. Dark hair, plastered wet against skull. Sarah woke with a gasp, her sleeping bag twisted around her legs. Emma and Lily slept peacefully beside her, unaware of her distress. The living room was silent, except for their steady breathing and the distant hum of the heating system. But something wasn't right. Over the familiar nighttime sounds, she heard it, running water from upstairs. Her heart began to race. It was just a coincidence, she told herself. Someone was using the bathroom. Emma's parents were upstairs. Everything was fine. Then she remembered Emma's parents had left for a late dinner with friends. They weren't due back for another hour. Sarah sat frozen, listening to the water run. It sounded exactly as it had in her dream, full force, violent, wrong. She looked at her sleeping friends, wondering if she should wake them. But what would she say? That she had a scary dream about their bathroom. The sound continued, demanding attention. Sarah knew she had to check. If nothing else, she could blame paranoia about wasting water or flooding. She extracted herself from her sleeping bag, careful not to disturb the others. The stairs creaked under her weight, each step amplifying her fear. The upstairs hallway was dark, except for a thin strip of light beneath the bathroom door. Just like her dream, steam escaped through the gap. The acrid smell was there too, making her gag slightly. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob. The door swung open before she touched it. Steam billowed out, temporarily blinding her. When it cleared, she saw the bathroom exactly as it had appeared in her dream: running faucet, fogged mirror, and the window. The open window. A dark figure crouched on the sill, halfway through entering. Their eyes met through the steam, and Sarah saw something familiar in the intruder's gaze: recognition. She screamed, slamming the door and running downstairs. Her friends woke to her panic, and Emma's parents arrived home minutes later to find 3 terrified girls huddled in the kitchen. The police already on their way. The investigation revealed disturbing details. The intruder had been watching the house, waiting for Emma's parents to leave. He had known about the sleepover, known which window would be easiest to access. The running water had been meant to mask any sounds of his entry, but he hadn't expected Sarah's warning dream. Later, they would learn he had targeted other homes with teenage girls, always using the same method. But this time, a premonition had disrupted his careful planning. Sarah never attended another sleepover, and for years, she avoided bathrooms at night. But sometimes, when she hears running water in the dark hours, she remembers how a dream saved 3 lives. The police never caught the intruder, but Sarah carries one detail that wasn't included in the official report: the recognition in his eyes when he saw her through the steam. It was the same look he had given her in the dream, as if somehow, across the barrier between reality and nightmare, they had already met. Now, years later, Sarah still dreams of water, but these dreams don't feel like warnings anymore. They feel like reminders that sometimes our deepest fears can become our strongest protections, and that the line between nightmare and reality is thinner than we think. Light under the door. The Richardson house had always unsettled me, even before that weekend. Maybe it was the way the 1960s suburban architecture seemed frozen in time, or how the windows reflected sunlight at odd angles. When my cousin Amy invited me for a weekend stay while her parents were away, I almost declined. Now I wish I had. Friday evening started normally enough. Amy and I ordered pizza, watched terrible reality TV, and caught up on college gossip. The guest room she prepared for me was on the 2nd floor, directly across from the master bedroom. "Don't mind any creaking," she said. "This house talks in its sleep." I settled into bed around midnight, exhausted from the 3-hour drive. Sleep came quickly, but what followed was anything but restful. The first awakening felt real. I opened my eyes to complete darkness, save for a thin line of blue-white light beneath my door. It pulsed gently, like a fluorescent bulb struggling to stay lit. The digital clock on the nightstand read 3:33 a.m. I sat up, straining to hear any sound from the hallway. The light continued its rhythmic flickering, casting strange shadows that seemed to move independently of the pulse. As I watched, the gap beneath the door appeared to widen, the light growing stronger. My hand reached for the bedside lamp, but before I could switch it on, I woke up again. This time, the room was different. The furniture had shifted slightly, the dresser now closer to the window. The mirror angled toward my bed instead of the door. The clock still read 3:33 a.m., but now showed seconds counting backward. and under the door, that same blue, white light pulsed. I pinched myself, hard enough to leave marks. This had to be another dream. But the pain felt real, and when I swung my legs over the bed, the carpet was cold and textured beneath my feet. I approached the door slowly, drawn by the hypnotic rhythm of the light. Just as my fingers brushed the doorknob, consciousness slipped away again. The third awakening brought panic. The room had transformed entirely, walls closer, ceiling lower, furniture twisted into impossible angles. The light under the door had turned a deep, arterial red. The clock still read 3:33 a.m., but now the numbers were bleeding down the display. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped. My body felt heavy, paralyzed. The door began to crack open on its own, revealing nothing but that terrible red glow. And then I truly woke up. Sweat soaked my pajamas, and my heart hammered against my ribs. The room was normal, moonlight filtering through thin curtains. The clock read 3:32 a.m. As I watched, it clicked over to 3:33. That's when I saw it, blue, white light seeping under my door. I lay perfectly still, trying to convince myself this was just another false awakening. But everything felt different this time. The air had weight, carrying the faint scent of ozone. And beneath the door, the light didn't pulse, it moved, like someone walking past with a flashlight. A floorboard creaked in the hallway, then another. My phone was on the nightstand, and I reached for it with trembling fingers. As I did, a shadow interrupted the light beneath the door. Someone was standing there. The handle turned slowly, metal scraping against metal. I wanted to run, to hide, to wake up again, but this was no dream. The door opened just enough for me to see a beam of light sweep across the room. Then I heard Amy scream. What followed exists in my memory as fragments running into the hallway, seeing two masked figures illuminated by their flashlights. Amy appearing from her room with a baseball bat, the sound of breaking glass. The intruders fled through a downstairs window, leaving behind dropped tools and muddy footprints. The police arrived quickly. They said we were lucky. The burglars had targeted our house, thinking it was empty for the weekend. They hadn't expected anyone to be home. Evidence suggested they had been watching the house for days, learning patterns, waiting for their opportunity. But that wasn't what haunted me. In the following weeks, I couldn't shake the connection between my dreams and reality. The police report noted the burglars had been in the house for several minutes before we discovered them, moving from room to room with flashlights. Their lights would have cast that same blue, white glow under my door. Had my dreams been trying to warn me, or had some part of my sleeping mind sensed their presence, translating real-world stimuli into a series of escalating nightmares? I spent months in therapy, trying to untangle dream from reality. The false awakenings continued for a while, each featuring that familiar light under the door. But gradually, they evolved. The light became less threatening, more like a guardian than a warning. Perhaps my mind was rewriting the trauma, transforming fear into protection. Amy sold the house eventually. Neither of us could stand to visit after that night. But sometimes, when I'm half awake in those early morning hours, I still check for lights under my door. Not out of fear, but out of respect for the way our minds try to protect us, weaving warnings into dreams when our conscious defenses are down. The Richardson house taught me that the boundary between dreams and reality isn't always clear. Sometimes our deepest fears are more than just imagination. And sometimes the light under the door isn't just a dream. It's a message trying to break through.